on that a little bit as well. So let's get right into the agenda for the workshop. Who am I? Why is this stuff important? We'll cover that as a brief intro about who I am. We'll first talk about the A Act, which is your administrative tasks and establishing authority as a business owner. Things like having your business bank account, which we'll cover, your LLCs and your EINs. Then we'll cover some contract topics. And then last but not least, we'll cover some brief topics related to trademarks. So A, C, and T. So just to start, who am I? My name is Nina. I'm a New York-based lawyer and a former lobbyist from the city. I quit my job actually 4 years ago this week, and I felt like I didn't have any time to travel or really focus on myself. I was working really hard and I was working for so many other people. And as I'm sure you guys can relate to, like, there's just such a difference between working for someone else and working for yourself, right? I would imagine we're mostly small business owners or people who are higher up in whatever business that they're in. And so I left my firm to find some more freedom. I started my own flat fee law firm and contract template shop after I met a lot of other people who were just bringing up some of the guys have brought up in the chat. They weren't getting paid. They weren't, establishing themselves with an LLC. They weren't taking finances through having a bank account or anything. And so it became really clear to me what I needed to do. When I had quit my job, I didn't really have an idea of what I was going to do next. But then throughout traveling and meeting other freelancers and other entrepreneurs, I came up with this idea. So getting right into it, we are going to jump right into the admin portion of this workshop. So number one, your LLC. Number two, or your S Corp, C Corp, whatever you go with. Number two, getting your EIN if you are a US-based business, which I'm sure all of you are if you're part of the Lance community, because you guys are basically a US bank right now. And then last but not least, your business bank account, which hopefully all of you maybe have already by being part of the Lance community. So a couple of things to note. I'm going to use the word LLC a lot in this workshop, but at first I want to distinguish between being a sole proprietor and being a business entity. So when I say LLC, for you, it might look like an S Corp or a C Corp or a partnership or any other kind of formal business entity. But most freelancers and most people that I work with go the route of starting an LLC. So why would you want to start, some kind of business entity? For me, there's a few benefits. Number one, you have an instant mindset shift. So when you go the route of registering yourself as a business, you have an instant mindset shift where you are now stepping into the shoes of a business owner. Even if you didn't bring in any money yet, even if you don't have any clients yet, as soon as you register your LLC or whatever business entity that you are registering, you instantly, something shifts in your mindset and you are now in the mindset of a business owner. That to me is really invaluable, and it's really important for a lot of people to start to take themselves seriously. Now, I do get a lot of questions about people who say, oh, well, I registered as a sole proprietor. I have an EIN. I don't have an LLC. I'm still a sole proprietor. I have an EIN. I have a business bank account. Like, am I still protected? Yes and no. So registering with your state as a sole proprietor will enable you to get that EIN, which is basically your social security number for your business. And it will allow you to get a bank account and do other things with, as far as financial things like getting a business PayPal account, business Stripe account. But you're not going to protect yourself legally from liability, because this is the second biggest benefit that I think comes into play as soon as you register an LLC or an S Corp or C Corp or whatever route you go. You then get person under the eyes of the law. Like your business now becomes a citizen. It has the rights of citizens under US law. As soon as you separate your personal life from your business entity. So what does that mean? If you go the route of registering as an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp versus registering just as a sole proprietor, you now have the ability to get loans out. You have the ability to own assets. You have the ability to have that company become the parent company and own other companies. You just open up your world to really diversifying and expanding the opportunities available to you through creating that separate legal person under the eyes of the law. You also create a distinction between you and your personal assets and your business assets. So what does that mean? You know, obviously you can have your own bank account as an LLC. You can own your own car. You can own your own real estate through your LLC or S Corp or C Corp. But not only that, if anything happens to you and legally, you know, you find yourself in a situation where you have to owe money, right? To, I don't know, maybe you defaulted, unfortunately, you know, business isn't going well and you owe payments for your car or your building or whatever other assets you are, or if someone sues you, God forbid, knock on wood, you now have protection where you have a shield, a distinction between your business and your business assets versus your personal assets. And that could be someone. A lot of friends are starting out, we start out and we don't have a lot of assets, right? Like when I started my business, I didn't have a lease on a building. I didn't have a lease on a car. I had a couple of bank accounts and like, you know, a couple of like random bonds from when I was a baby that someone put in my name, right? When I was born, I didn't have like that many assets or anything, but we're not all in the same position. Maybe some of you might be married and you have a partner and you have shared assets and you have shared bank accounts and you have a mortgage on a home and your partner has a really successful career and they earn a good salary, right? Wouldn't you want to protect that by starting your entity and having something like an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp to create that separation? Because a sole proprietorship wouldn't do that. Or, you know, maybe you have yourself another career and this is a side hustle and you're earning income through a salary. Well, if anyone comes after you and sues you and they get a judgment against you, they could garnish your wages, which means that a chunk of each paycheck goes to pay off that person before it ever goes into your personal bank account because you didn't separate your personal assets from your business assets. So that is another huge benefit legally of separate, you know, a person and a business. Now, as far as the difference between LLC, S Corp, C Corp, there are some legal distinctions between what is required of you to set that up. It's a lot lower barrier of entry to start an LLC versus all of the formalities and requirements that you need to set up an S Corp or a C Corp. But I'm going to not dive too deep into that in this conversation because for most of you, that distinction is really going to be a tax distinction. And it's a conversation that is probably first and foremost to be had with your tax professional or whoever helps you with your finances and tax planning and tax strategy, because that is where a lot of the biggest distinct differences come into play. So for example, like an LLC, you know, you don't pay yourself a salary, you take what's called an owner's draw versus if you know you want to collect like a $1,200 check or something every 2 weeks, that's a salary and you would need a corporation for that, not an LLC. And that's all conversations that, you know, you and your bookkeeper and tax professional should have. So we're not going to dive too deep into which kind of entity should you have, because for most of you, the difference is going to be from a tax perspective and financial perspective and not from a legal perspective. Just know that from a legal perspective, the most important distinction that you need to know is the difference between a sole proprietorship and any kind of business entity that's registered So an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, partnership, etc. Okay. So that is the first step that you would need before you go into something like creating a business bank account. So once you have your LLC, and if you are going to go the route of starting an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, I do have a resource for you if you need help with DIYing that. I use a website that I have been using ever since I was working at a law firm, where you can basically get on the phone and you can tell them whatever information you need, and they will help you register your LLC in like 15 minutes. And the rate that they charge is anywhere between $79 to $99 plus whatever your state filing fee is. So you can always message me after this workshop. You'll have my contact information at the end and I can share that with you. But you might want, if you're going the route of an S Corp or a C Corp, or there's other members involved, like you have a partner or something, you're going to want to go through a law firm, because you're going to need to create things like an operating agreement if it's an LLC, which is a contract about the ownership and the management of the operation of the company, or you're going to need to create things like corporate bylaws, which is more so the route of the S Corp and the C Corp, and that also is like a roadmap of how the business will operate for those entities. But then once you get that, you can register for your EIN, which is basically your social security number for your business. And you can do that for free on the IRS website, and it takes like 15 minutes. Then once you have your EIN, you can get your business bank account. And we're all here because we have a great idea of what business bank account that you could use. I can't wait. I'm going to get I have a couple of new ventures, and please don't mind if you see me like reaching out off screens, because I'm just also dog sitting. But yeah, I'm really excited for Lance, because I've seen a big issue with people in the past not knowing what route to go when they are starting out looking for a business bank account. It could be really overwhelming. A lot of the brick and mortar banks charge a lot of fees to have an account, or you have to go in person and wait and sit there and like look at the different account options and like wait for the guy to get back from lunch so you can open up the account, and it can be really annoying. So for me, I know that convenience and ease and having things just be clear and straightforward is so worth it when you're a business owner, because like you have so many other things to do and so many other things to worry about. So I think it will be really great for everyone on this call to go that route, right? Okay, so now I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Wait, my slides are not working. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. There we go. So now we'll shift into talking about contracts, the C in act like a CEO. So when I created this presentation initially, a little bit of more background about me is I work a lot with service-based businesses. Not all of you are going to be service-based businesses. So some of this information might be a little irrelevant, but hopefully you have some good takeaways from this. Maybe in the chat, you guys could let me know how many of you are service-based businesses while I go through this. But I think that the most important thing for any service-based business owner to have, or even if you're a product-based business or whatever your business is to have, first and foremost, a really rock solid client agreement. So here I wrote one-on-one client agreement because I work a lot with online service providers and coaches. But if you're, let's say you sell candles, or let's say you sell, I don't know, you're a real estate agent or something, whatever your product or service is should have some kind of terms and conditions attached to it that protect that transaction. Because I saw in the chat that a lot of you had mentioned that you were worried about non-payment, you're worried about, let's see what other people said. So a lot of you said you're service-based. Non-payments, things like that. Exactly. So whether you're selling a service or whether you're selling a product, the most important contract that you are going to want to start with as a solopreneur is your client agreement. So for some of you, that might look like your one-on-one client agreement if you're some kind of coach, or your client agreement if you're something like a copywriter or a graphic designer. If you're a product-based business, then it might be your terms and conditions of purchase for that product, including like the shipping policy and return policy and stuff like that. If you're someone like me who sells, like most of my income comes from contract templates that I sell. And if you're me, that's a digital product. So the most important contract that I have is the terms and conditions when people purchase the digital products from me. Of course, I have a separate contract for when people get legal services from me. That's like step 2 when we talk about contract toolkit. I would even so far as to having the right client agreement or customer agreement or terms of purchase, whatever you want to call it, is even more important at the very, very beginning, having something like an LLC. If you're like, damn, I only have $300 and I need to start my business, what do I do? Do I start an LLC or do I get a contract from someone or a contract template or whatever? Having the contract can protect you even if you don't have an LLC or a business entity yet. Yes, you're still opening yourself up to a lot of liability because you're signing it in your personal capacity. So, you're still on the hook as far as your personal assets go. Like we talked about before, you're not going to have that shield to protect you that an LLC or an S Corp or C Corp will offer you, but you'll still have the contract to protect you somewhat, and you can still enter into a contract in your personal capacity. So although it's not, any other lawyer, like obviously they're going to tell you, you need to have an LLC, you need to have your contract, after that, you need to have your EIN, your bank account. I know that not everything gets done in order. And I know that a lot of people are really bootstrapping their business and they don't have like all these unlimited resources to invest in things like legal protections at first. So I would say like the most important thing that's going to help you is having that client agreement, that, main priority client agreement at first. And then once you bring in that income, like hopefully you make, a couple $100 from that arrangement, then make sure you get your LLC registered, because that can really depend. Like in a state like California, I think you have to pay $800 or something to, have your. In a state like New York, I paid $300 said and done. So it was a little more. It could be a lot of money, but it's something like a contract template, can be a little bit more accessible at first. Just going to check the chat quick because I see a couple of messages popped up. Okay, so everybody. Okay, yeah, even.
If I can jump in really quickly while you're reading the messages, just to flag that every state is different in terms of costs and very different in terms of both the setup and renewal fees. So make sure that you both are like accounting for that, as well as making sure to deduct it when it comes to tax time, because like California, you were noting, it's actually $50 to incorporate the business just from a fees perspective, but then $800 to renew year over year. So you want to make sure that you've got that, covered and that you're deducting it from your taxes as a business cost, versus a state like New York, where it's $1,500 to set everything up if you go through the servicing and whatnot, and fees and publication costs, but then it's $50 to renew every year after that. So just make sure that you're aware of that you're tracking it, you're renewing it appropriately, and then finally deducting it and acknowledging it as a business expense. Sorry, just wanted to flag that while we were midstream.
Thank you. Because to your point, like exactly depend on the cost for people and it could be really expensive. So that's why I say at some points, depending on the business owner, it might not be the first thing that they do, right? And I see a couple of people have now brought up the publication requirement in New York. I know people that work at big law firms, like top law firms in New York City, who advise their clients not to pay for the publication. I'm not advising you to do this, but there's also things to do where like the penalty for not publishing is sometimes lower than the cost of publishing. So I'm not giving any legal advice, but what I would say is that it really does depend on who you talk to as far as what to do first and what to do when, because certain costs are more prohibitive to people when starting out versus maybe getting something like going to LegalZoom or My Shop, shameless plug or whatever, but for contact at first. So yes, to that point, know the specifics around registering your business by state, and also please talk to a tax professional in tandem with talking to a lawyer, because certain things are deductible and maybe certain things aren't. So really important for you to know the parameters when you're getting ready to start your LLC. So, you know, January, if you are thinking about registering your LLC, S Corp, whatever kind of business entity you are, can be time of year to do that because it becomes really easy for you to keep track. January, start of the year, when do I need to renew? I started my business in January. I registered my LLC in January of 2020 because I just figured it was way easier for me to keep track of. So I wouldn't have to be like, oh, what month do I need to renew? What month is this, right? So yeah, talk to someone in your state if you need to know. Okay, so I saw in the chat, we have a lot of service-based businesses. Feel free to jump in and even let me know a little bit more about what you do. Like I said, I work with a lot of online service-based providers, but I work a lot with coaches and people in that space also. So I'm going to jump into a couple of other notes about contracts for those kinds of service providers. So I'm going to skip through some of this so that we have time for questions. We should all know why we need a contract, right? We need to protect things like scope of work, disclaimers, and things we're going to get into in a moment. But I want to talk about why you might not want to just DIY it from scratch or copy paste from Google, because your contract does not only cover what it says, but sometimes, actually most times, what gets in trouble is what your contract does not say. So we all know our business more than anybody else, right? When clients come to me as a lawyer and they ask me to go over their contract with them, I sit down and I make sure I dive deep into understanding what their business does, because they know more than me what the nature and day-to-day operations are, what their boundaries are, and things like that. I translate that into what's in the contract, but I also pull from experience working with other industry owners and other people aside from just that business owner that's in the same industry. And I issue spot and come up with other terms that can protect them from issues that they might not see at this point in time. So when you are a freelancer, you're starting out your bootstrapping business and you're thinking, okay, that girl, Nina the lawyer, she told me my client contract's the most important thing. I'm going to go and I'm going to sit and write my client contract today. That's great that you're taking initiative, but I do want to caution you and say to just also keep in mind that it's not what your contract says, but it's also what it doesn't say that might harm you. So for example, a lot of you are going to be great at writing what your scope of work is. I do, if I'm a graphic designer, I'll do your home page, your about page, your services page. I'll do your privacy policy page. And you'll get a 1 hour phone call, 3 rounds of edits, delivery within weeks or something, right? That's what you'd put in the scope of work. But maybe you were overlooking what to put in the intellectual property section because you're so good at knowing the scope of work, but maybe you don't have the kind of creative, a graphic designer, a copywriter, a photographer. I might want to say something like, own the content until you make all payments, right? So that if you stop paying me halfway through, you can't keep using the website without infringing on my intellectual property rights. Or if you're a photographer, you want to make sure that your contract doesn't say like, oh, you get full ownership of all the photos, because then you didn't carve out any rights for you to use and license those photos out so that you can use them on your social media, use them as your portfolio. I've also worked with photographers who do a lot of business in LA and in Hollywood, and they brought up a really good point to me about how they had a client who got photos for them for a big restaurant in Venice, California. And they'd been using the same photos for like the last 3 years. And now at this point, it's way outdated as far as, you know, style of editing that's like trendy now. It doesn't reflect the photographer's work anymore. And they've never brought him back again to do more work for them. And they're still using the same photos year after year after year and never paying him again. They're using them in advertising, you know, in print and billboards and stuff like that, and not giving him any credit or any payment or compensation. And so to him, it was really important that he update his contract to say, you can use these contracts, you have an unlimited license for to a year, but then after that, you know, I'm still the owner of the content, but you just get the license. There's so many issues when it comes to intellectual property, and go over this kind of nuanced discussion for any kind of industry. If you're a course creator, you know, giving people a license to access your course, but you're still the owner of that content, they can't go and sell that course to someone else, right? These are things that have come up from clients. So my point here is just to be sure that your contract is actually covering what you need to. Please don't just, you know, write out a scope of work, write out like a couple of bullet points about what you're delivering and how they're paying you and think that's it, because there's so many issues that come that you might be overlooking at this point in time. And that's why I am a believer, and of course biased, but it comes from love, that you should not just like write your contract totally from scratch or copy and paste from Google, because there are a lot of things that come up. A couple of issues that I want to touch on for service providers here. If you're in the coaching space or in the consulting space, make sure that you have really strong and clear disclaimers. Life coaching is a big industry now, and really managing expectations about the difference between coaching and therapy. If you're in the fit expectations and disclaiming liability, if you're, you know, making sure that people are talking to their doctors to get approval for certain workout plans and diet plans and stuff like that. Even for me, like when I sell my contract templates, I have strong disclaimers that say, this is a DIY option. You're purchasing a DIY template that was written by a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer because you buy the template, right? There's no attorney-client relationship. I don't know anything about your business. There's, you know, this is separate. I have a separate LLC for my contract than I do for my PLLC, professional limited liability company, that is for my law firm. So I have two separate entities, right? So things like that are all covered in disclaimers. You know, making sure that if you're talking about payment, you're not only talking about how much they owe, but payment plans, what happens if there's late fees or late payments, like paying you through PayPal, sending them an invoice, are they doing it through ACH? Making sure that you all have the ability to charge, authorization to charge their card. If you sell digital products, chargebacks are really popular now with like fraudsters, where they'll pay for something and instead of going to you for a refund, they'll go straight to their credit card or bank or whatever and ask refund. So you need a contract that covers like that. And that's pretty much the main topics that I see come into play with service-based contracts. This was like probably the most important thing to drive home in this presentation, because the last thing I'll leave you with when it comes to client contracts is whatever you sign becomes law. You can't change it retroactively unless you send it and sign a new contract, right? So you can't just say, oh, I meant for it. Oh, I didn't know that was in there. You really need to know and understand exactly what your contract says and what you're getting into, because whatever you sign becomes the law between you. So make sure that you know what your contract says, covers all of your. Now, after you have your contract, to someone's point earlier, you're going to want to also have contracts to protect you in other relationships. So if you have a service-based contract, like I have a contract, let's say for one-on-one clients as a lawyer, I also have to have a totally separate contract that covers totally separate issues for like a course or a digital product like my contract templates, a group program, or something like the coaching or education space, making sure that your group program contract is different than the one-on-one client contract, because now you have other people engaging with each other. You also have, you know, things like confidentiality, harassment, and things like that come into play. Your website privacy policy requires law, even if it's not a business. All websites need to have a data or website privacy policy, so that's super important. You're going to want to have specific contracts for any kind of collaborations. So let's say I was going to give this workshop to Lance to use for, like, you know, a course that they're selling or something like that. I would give a contract that gives them the permission to use the workshop so that they now have a record of me giving them access to use that. Because I've seen in this online space, especially, a lot of people aligning their reputations with other businesses really quickly because they're just looking for the opportunity. And then you get to know them more and you're like, I don't really align with your opportunity anymore. I don't really align with your values anymore. And then it kind of becomes hard and awkward to be like, hey, can you take my workshop off of your thing? Or I don't want you to be an affiliate for my program anymore. So having contracts to kind of set the time frame and set expectations works really well for that too. And also making sure that you as a business have the right to use that content is important. If you're co-creating something with someone, like a joint venture, that's a totally separate kind of collaboration agreement than, you know, giving someone access to your content. Because now you're talking about profit splitting and splitting, you know, the tax liability and stuff for that profit, splitting the losses. And then last but least, the other really important group of contracts that you would maybe need as you scale your business are independent contractor agreements or employee agreements, and things like non-disclosure agreements to protect your proprietary information. So I really just wanted to quickly paint the picture that you have a whole suite of contracts that you will need. It's not just one and done. Contracts are not one size fits all. So keep that in mind as you're budgeting to scale your business too. I have something on my Instagram to show you that you don't need any kind of fancy software to have people sign contracts. I have a video. You guys can just message me. This is far down on Instagram now that it might be hard to find, but I have a video that shows you how to sign contracts for free from your phone if you want to DM me after the workshop to get it. And then really quickly brushing through trademarks so we have time to answer questions. Trademarks, intellectual property. This is something that is really important beginning for some businesses, but most freelancers, not really going to make or break your business right away. Not really the top priority for people. I saw in the chat, someone had mentioned that they Googled and saw, I looked at my business name through Google, shows that someone else has my name, but she lives somewhere else. It isn't an LLC. Does this mean I could register my business as an LLC? So a trademark operates on a federal level. Of course, there's state trademarks, but no one really registers those. Trademarks operate on a federal level, and that means they own that asset. You own the right to use that trademark in a particular way. So if someone has the LLC, but you have the trademark, they even though they own the LLC name, they're still infringing on your trademark, and you could collect for that, right? You have a right to either, you could sue them. There's so many other routes that we're not going to get into, but you have the ownership. They are infringing on your ownership because the trademark office doesn't check to see who has the LLC. It's our responsibility as the trademark owner to make sure no one's infringing on your trademark. On the flip side, you can be using the name, like you could have the social handle for it, you can have the LLC for it, but if you didn't do a trademark search and see that someone else owned the trademark, you could be infringing on their trademark, right? So trademark law, very important for you to know that the only way that you can have untethered access to use like a certain word or phrase or logo in your industry is to have the trademark. It doesn't matter if you have the domain name, doesn't matter if you have the social handle, doesn't matter if you have the LLC. Whoever has the trademark has the right. Trademarks, you have to register with the US Patent and Trademark Office. Now, if you'd been using it for like 5 years and someone beat you to the punch and registered it first, since you'd been using it first, you could, have what's called a cancellation proceeding, and essentially convoluted. It's really expensive, and the cheapest route, even though it's not cheap at all, is to file and register a trade with the PTO. Now, this is a little bit, outside the scope of the call today, but I wanted to give you a little bit of information about trademarks just in general. What can you trademark? Your name, your logo, your slogan, your course title, your podcast title. Something that you need to know, though, is that there are 45 different trademark classes or categories, and
Uh-oh, guys, looks like Nina is gonna try to hop back on in a second. Cool. In the meantime, if you have questions, first of all, we're definitely not gonna get to all the questions right now, but Nina's coming back tomorrow at 5 p.m. EST. We're gonna do like a wine and vibe session of just casual question asking as a follow-up to this. So if you're available, you should definitely come. But yeah, that's Una. Did you want
I was just gonna jump in. Yeah. Hi, everybody. This is Una, the CEO of Lance. If we haven't met, wonderful to meet you today. I'll also be in a session tomorrow with the wine and vibe because I love wine and I love vibing, so it makes sense. But there was something that she touched upon that I thought was really important and useful as you're looking to kind of specify contracts for exactly what you do. And Nina, as she's jumping on here, I was just kind of flagging that she touched upon the specifics, right? Really make sure your contracts go over the specifics of what you're doing with your client. And I think that this is often overlooked because you're kind of like, well, we're figuring out our relationship and, the contract of work might expand and stuff. But it's really useful to say exactly what you're going to be responsible for, what they're going to be responsible for in terms of like review timelines, right? So you don't have like a lag in terms of how long they have to review things. And then finally, the more specific you are about like that scope of work, you can actually field questions from them as their scope creep, which is inevitable as a freelancer, right? They're like, this is amazing. This is great. We love working with you. Or, you know what, like, I thought I wanted this, but I actually want more of that. Then you can add an addendum and create a new contract and pay yourself more or better for whatever they realized that they needed or wanted, or, you know, the expansion of using your services. So I've just found that really useful in talking with freelancers using Lance and in workshops that I've done as well. So it's just something to you know, spend a little bit more time on, because it can really benefit you in terms of making sure you're paying yourself the right amount and then really compensating yourself as things grow inevitably. So just wanted to flag that. Nina, I'll hand it back over to you to take over. Just wanted to build upon that for a moment while you were coming back on.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your insights and everything too, because, you know, it's always, like I said, it's a lawyer isn't some superior person. We work in tandem with business owners, and we understand more through learning from you. And I'm sorry if my quality of my audio or video has cut off. My computer is not connecting, so I hopped on my phone. But we're at the last slide anyway, so I'll get to that in a moment. But just a little piece of advice that one of my law professors shared with me in my first year of law school is, she said, you are never assume you're more sophisticated than your client, because Steve Jobs had a lawyer. You know, Elon Musk has a lawyer. President Obama was a lawyer, but he had his own lawyers and advisors advising him. So there's never a way, like, you're never going to be in a position where you're not learning from the client just as much as you are able to share with them. And hopefully that can, you know, resonate with you in whatever industry you're in also. You know, just keeping that piece of advice in mind, like, never assume you're more sophisticated than the people you work with, because you're always going to learn more from them as well. So yeah, thank you for that insight. I just wanted to quickly wrap up the trademark conversation we had, and then make sure I have time to answer your questions before my internet decides to, you know, break again. But essentially what I was saying with trademarks is just make sure that you are filing your trademark in the right class, because I filed my trademark application for my name, CEO skills, for the way I was using it for my course online, and also for my podcast. It ended up getting approved for the course. They rejected it for reasons I won't get into for my podcast. And the other thing I want to say, though, is, like, you don't get that filing feedback if your podcast or your trademark gets rejected. So that $275, now they raised the price to $350, that I spent on that application fee, I don't get that back. So really important for trademarks. Yeah, you could go through LegalZoom, you could try to DIY it, but really important that you go to a lawyer who can help you with the analysis, because you don't get the money you spent on filing fees back if it gets rejected. And although my firm technically helps with trademark law, I really focus more on contracts. So if you are looking for a lawyer to help you with trademarks, message me and I can connect you with so many colleagues of mine that have resources. Whether you're trying to DIY it or whether you want to hire a lawyer, I have so many friends in the space that understand online business and small business that could help you. So just let me know if you're interested in filing a trademark. The last thing I'll say about that is, with trademarks, it doesn't matter if it's not identical, like the way you're using it versus someone else. Like, oh, I spelt, you know, the word with an exclamation point instead of an I. No, it just has to create confusion for the consumer that the government uses when they think, oh, are you infringing on their trademark or not? It just has to be confusingly similar. So I can't open up a burger spot called Burger Prince and then say, oh, well, it's not Burger King, because Burger King's going to say, yeah, but you're confusing the consumer because you're making it seem like our brands are associated when they're not. And I would be liable for trademark infringement if I opened up a burger spot called Burger Prince. So that's a good example, I think, that might put it into perspective. And that's where I'll end the chat about trademarks, because I want to make sure I get to your questions about everything else. So I I'm sorry, I don't have my presentation up that has information about how you can reach out to me if you do have follow-up questions. My Instagram is where you can find me and reach me quickest and easiest. And my Instagram is at Nina the Lawyer. So
I put it
easy
in the
enough.
chat also, so if anyone wants to go back and check there.
Thanks. So yeah, that's really where you can find me and reach me and ask me any kind of follow-up questions from the workshop. But we also have the happy hour tomorrow, and we have some time now if anyone has any questions that or any topics that I didn't get to cover in that presentation that you want to chat about quick now. And sorry again that I had to cut out and go on my phone. I hate that.
All good. All good. If anyone wants to hop off of mute, if you have a specific question you want to get answered while we have Nina here right now, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Just gonna.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I go by Young, and thank you for this workshop. I just hop up to ask a quick question. So I do want to ask about because really I'm working as a company is offering our job that will be like started January and end of August. And as a freelancer, I'm like I do want to ask about because freelancers usually manage time. Like usually sometimes I do multiple projects. Like, and I do want to ask about like if it is possible to do like side job, because freelancer usually work as a project base. So, and I'm curious like if there is like a legal term that I should like look for when I work contract with them.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you have every right to want to work with other clients too, because of what you said. You're a freelancer, right? So they're not hiring you full time as an employee and paying you a salary to lock in all of your attention. They're hiring you as an independent contractor. And a lot of people, they kind of abuse the system when it comes to hiring independent contractors. And this is good for business too. Federal law, labor law says that, you know, if you are going to dictate when a person has to do their job and you're going to give them a ton of direction about using their job, they're technically not and I'm really generalizing this. So there's a lot more. I'm not being super like, you know, stickler about what the law actually says, but federal law will probably say that if they're telling you like where you have to be and when you have to be there, they're treating you like an employee, but paying you a contractor. And that's illegal because they're not paying for your taxes and things like that. So you should be allowed as an independent contractor to dictate your own schedule, right? Now they can deadlines and things like that, but they can't have control over how you do your job. They can tell you what you want to do, but they can't tell you how. So when you're reviewing the contract, you know, really make sure you're looking through and looking at what it says about exclusivity or non-compete. They'll try to throw in non-compete clauses that might be thrown out by a court. Like they can't say, oh, you can't work with anyone, anywhere for all of time. They have to make sure it's reasonable in terms of time that you can't work with other people and in terms of location. So that's something to note. And then once you do start working with them, keep, you know, just be cognizant, just be aware of how they're treating you, if they're treating you like an employee or an independent contractor, because they're hiring you in the contract as a contractor. So that's my 2 little bits of advice about that.
Thank you so much. That's so amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have time for maybe 1 more question, or you got to go, Nina?
No, we have time for, you know, I have about 5 minutes before I have to hop off.
Anyone have 1 last one? A zinger? We got a hand raise I saw for a second. All right. Okay. Brandy, wait, was that you? You have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Well, when legally establishing your business, even if it's a side hustle, is that you have a contract, even if it's not an LLC, that you have a built-in contract. So that's what you were saying, because you were kind of
Yeah.
breaking up earlier.
Yeah, so thank you actually for asking that question, because my last slide, which I didn't get to use, is, okay, so this was a lot of overwhelming information. What do you prioritize? If you have to prioritize 3 things this year or today. Number 1, have a rock solid contract that you can use for whatever your main revenue driver is. If it's one-on-one clients, if it's a product you're selling, if it's a digital product, make sure you have a rock solid contract for that. Then number 2 would be to have your LLC or your S Corp, your business bank account, your EIN, all of those things set up. Because sometimes it takes that revenue of that client service or whatever to get the revenue to pay for your LLC or pay for an attorney or whatever, right? Then third might be for some people getting a trademark, or it might be for some people having other contracts in that contract toolkit. Like for me, my third priority was making sure I had really good collaboration contracts, because a lot of people were asking me to become affiliates for my contract shop and earn commission for my contract shop, right? So I had to have a really rock solid contract for that. So that was my third priority. For you, it might be a collaboration contract. It might be a contract to hire some, like a VA or something. It might be your trademark, but everything else we talked about falls in that third priority. So thanks for that.
So if I were to I have a freelance writing side hustle that I have. So if I were to establish that, and then maybe and also I have a blog. If I were to establish, it's kind of confusing to explain, start creating products through that blog, I would have to create separate contracts from those 2 things.
Well, yeah, like let's say you're doing, writing for people, that's your client contract, right? But let's say you're selling templates on, here's a blog template, or here's, some kind of like an ebook or something. That would be a different type of contract than the contract that covers like your deadlines for working with your one-on-one client and things like that. So 2 separate kinds of contracts. That makes sense. I see another hand raised. I don't know on my phone.
Oh, I kind of got another question. I recently kind of signed up through that email list of a lawyer. She kind of helps. She's a lawyer that has a website and as well as online courses, and helping bloggers be legally protected and everything. And I took one of her courses of that of a freelance contract and court template that she was offering for free. Most of the stuff she offers for free. Sometimes, yeah, she purchased. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are, if someone's offering you a product for free, I know a lot now about online marketing and sales funnels. And so the things that I offer for free are either the most like basic diluted versions to try to get people in my funnel so that they eventually buy something more, from me. Like that's just the way online sales funnels work. So if they're giving a contract away for free, what is she trying to sell you after? Is she trying to convince you that you need a customized call with her to customize it? Is she trying, just be wary of me and of anybody else selling you things online. I know that my 10 years of legal experience and, working with people from, bootstrapping their business to 9-figure business owners, I wouldn't be offering my contract templates for free. And if I were, they wouldn't be the best, most protective version. They might be great to start, but still make sure that you understand it and keep in mind the conversation we had before. What does it not cover that might not be protecting you? Because, the way that sales funnels work, what people offer for free. Like I offer a contracts checklist for free so that people can understand what contracts they need. But, you know, the contract that I know will protect people and that has served, you know, I've now served over 600 people with my template. I wouldn't be giving that out for free because that's my entire livelihood, right? So just with any kind of online marketing, any kind of sales funnel that you're entering into, any kind of free download that you get, just be aware that you're entered into someone's sales funnel, and the whole point of a sales funnel is to upsell you and convince you that you need something more. So when it comes to a contract or something that's really important to your business, I don't know if that's the free thing that I would do. However, it's probably, you know, I don't know what it says, but it's probably okay compared to like what you would find on Google or DIY. But is it the end all be all? And is it going to be exactly what your business needs? Probably not, because it's free.
And what if I were to say, look at, maybe have you look it through and everything? Would that, how would that work? If had you maybe analyze it through and maybe examine it? Because
Yes, offer kinds of services through my law firm. However, you know, I do have a certain pricing guide and everything that goes through that. So you can DM me and we can talk more about that offline. So I can just make sure that there's, because I do see one more hand raised and I don't know if that was your hand from before, if it's someone else. I want to make sure I get to that last question before I have to hop off in a minute, but you can DM me and we could talk further.
through Instagram, or you have other ways of being direct?
Through
Instagram. I put her, it's at Nina the lawyer. And it's also in the event description. But I think this is a great place to finish. We've got a few questions that we did answer, and then highly encourage for everybody who can to come tomorrow and get the rest of your questions answered. It's usually really helpful. We do these sessions after we have like a class, like a master class. And then during the actual question answering, a lot more stuff comes up that people find really, really useful, like hearing from other freelancers. So highly recommended. Again, thank you everyone for joining. And thank you for, if you're new to the community, welcome. You're also very much encouraged to write your introduction so that people can kind of like get to feel who you are, so that we can get to know you in the introductions tab inside the community. And yeah, keep coming back. Check your email. We'll be sending out, you know, whenever there's an event, you'll get a notification. And yeah, thank you, Nina, so much for joining. Again, everyone, this is Lance, which is a business bank account. Right now, we're only for US citizens. So if you're a US citizen, you can go ahead and open a Lance account if you don't have one already. And yeah, I'm here to help also with anything. If you want to reach out to me, I'm here to answer your questions as well. So thank you again, Nina. We'll see you tomorrow. And thank you everyone else for joining. And yes, George, it is a banking account, a business banking account that is digital. So if you just look up Lance on like the App Store or whatever, Google Play or Apple, you can find it. But this is just the community of the brand. Okay, cool. So on that note, thank you everyone, and hopefully see you tomorrow. Bye guys.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.